Welcome to Sherlock Shadow Channel, where every story hides a secret. Grab your coffee, sit back, and dive into a world of twists and turns. Tell us where you're watching from. Drop your city and country in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share the thrill with fellow mystery lovers. Let the adventure begin. Hercule Poirot and the Affair of the Florist's Secret Note. Chapter 1. A Shattered Prelude. Ashcroft Manor's grand ballroom gleamed under a constellation of crystal chandeliers, each droplet refracting light into prismatic fragments that danced across marble floors. In this august setting, high society's finest awaited the arrival of Signora Isabella Conti, the celebrated violinist whose artistry had stirred the hearts of Europe. Servants in immaculate livery moved with silent precision, bearing trays of delicate canapes and crystal flutes brimming with the finest champagne. Outside, a gentle April breeze rustled newly unfurled magnolia blossoms, hinting at spring's promise and concealing the tension simmering within. Lord Ashcroft himself presided over the evening with the poise of a seasoned host, his silvery hair tied back in a precise queue and his tailored black tailcoat bespoke an exacting taste. Yet tonight, those keen blue eyes flickered with the slightest trace of unease. Moments earlier, his steward, Mr. Pembroke, had delivered a discreet communication. The prized violin bow, an heirloom as exquisite as the Stradivarius it would command, was missing from the display case in the adjoining music room. Ashcroft's jaw remained immobile, but his jawline tightened, casting a shadow of worry across his aristocratic profile. Guests exchanged speculative glances. Some whispered of theft, others of some ill-placed prank. But all turned their gaze toward the stage, where an ivory-paneled harpsichord waited humbly, and two harpists tuned their instruments, awaiting the prima donna's cue. The orchestra's conductor, his baton poised like a conductor of destinies, stood center stage, silhouette motionless in anticipation. From the grand double doors emerged Signora Conti herself. She glided forward in a gown of midnight blue silk that seemed to swallow light, her jet-black hair piled atop her head in a cascade adorned with pearls. A ripple of applause greeted her, polite and admiring, but faltered when she paused at the edge of the dais, her eyes narrowing. Even from a distance, those sharp, dark eyes betrayed confusion. Lady Beatrice Langley, seated at the harpsichord, rose and offered Conti the concertmaster's baton, a slender rod of polished ebony, but Conti's gloved hand hovered uncertainly. A sudden hush fell as she glanced behind her, toward the closed doors of the music room. "Has anyone seen my bow?" she asked, voice calm yet edged with alarm. Lord Ashcroft stepped forward, offering his silver-topped cane. "My dear Signora, allow us to locate it at once." His voice was reassuring, yet beneath the courtesy lay palpable anxiety. He cast a quick look at Pembroke, whose ashen face spoke volumes. Constable Hargrave, summoned at once, entered the ballroom. "My lord," he said, bowing slightly, "I've received a report of a disturbance in the music room." He raised a hand, palm outward. "May I accompany Signora Conti to investigate?" Conti inclined her head with queenly dignity. "Of course." Together they left the hushed room, the conductor lowering his baton, his performance indefinitely postponed. In the silent wake of their departure, a whisper drifted through the assembled company. Beneath every mask of civility lay secrets waiting to bloom, and the smallest spark would soon set the petals fluttering. Chapter 2. The Empty Case. Constable Hargrave's voice, still echoing in the silence of the gallery, compelled the guests to follow him through the corridors of Ashcroft Manor. Each footstep resonated against the polished stone floors, heightening the unease that clung to the household like cobwebs. Signora Conti, her midnight blue gown rustling softly with each step, cast frantic glances at the closed doors of the music room. Lord Ashcroft and Lady Ashcroft hovered beside her, anxious lines creasing their elegant features. Inside the music room, moonlight filtered through tall sash windows, illuminating rows of instrument cases and music stands. The velvet-lined display case that should have cradled Signora Conti's cherished Stradivarius bow lay open and devastatingly empty. Hargrave, crouching, traced his gloved fingers over the impeccable velvet. No tear, no scuff, only the raw absence of the bow itself. The case was locked when the bow disappeared, Conti whispered, voice trembling. I secured it myself after rehearsal. She swallowed, struggling to compose herself. I left it here, certain no one would dare touch such an heirloom. Hargrave rose and offered his handkerchief. You did everything right, Signora. Yet someone with knowledge of this room's routine could have removed it without a trace. Lord Ashcroft stepped forward, pressing his cane's silver knob into his palm. Tell me, Constable, who else had occasion to handle this case today? Hargrave consulted his notebook. Only 2 footmen, sir. Evans and Cook. They retrieved the case from your drawing room earlier, as instructed, and delivered it here. Both reported no difficulty, no interruptions. Lady Ashcroft frowned. And no one approached them? No stray cleaning staff, no curious servant? Hargrave shook his head. The corridor outside was empty. Their path led directly from the drawing room through the servants' wing, then into this room. After they delivered the case, they reported nothing unusual. Poirot joined them then, cane in hand and moustaches immaculately poised. He surveyed the room with calm intensity. Mon ami, he said softly to Hargrave, we have the timeline and the path. Now we must observe each detail within. He approached the open case and leaned closer, eyes narrowed. Note the lack of disturbance, no velvet fibers clinging to the latch, no stray rosin under the lip. The bow was removed with care. He tapped the glass display behind him, and the instruments beyond, each remained undisturbed, yes? Only the bow vanished. Signora Conti nodded. Yes, my harp, the piano, the harpsichord, untouched. Poirot walked to the music stand, where the evening's sheet music lay neatly arranged. He ran a gloved fingertip along the top page. Observe the crease here. This paper is heavy parchment. To crease it so precisely suggests someone familiar with music stands, one accustomed to preparing for performance. He paused, turning to the assembled company. If the bow was removed by someone who knew its value, who handled it with expert care, then our suspect is no mere opportunist. We seek one among us with both the familiarity and the motive. Lord Ashcroft exchanged a glance with Lady Ashcroft. Motive? You mean someone intended to harm the Signora's performance? Poirot nodded slowly. Perhaps to forestall the concert, or to unsettle Signora Conti personally. A theft of this nature carries both artistic and personal sting. Hargrave motioned to the 2 footmen, now waiting in the hallway. Evans, Cook, please, step forward. The men entered, hats in hand, faces pale under the glow of the corridor lanterns. Men, Hargrave began, I understand you delivered this case without incident. Did you notice anyone else in the corridor? Anyone lingering, perhaps listening? Evans, the younger footman, cleared his throat. No, Constable. I carried the case down the west wing corridor. It was quiet. Cook was ahead of me, and he opened the door here. Then we left immediately. Cook nodded in confirmation. Nothing unusual, sir. No voices, no shadows. Poirot studied their expressions, an unspoken tension in their rigid postures. He allowed a moment of silence to stretch, inviting any slip of memory. Then, as if prompted by the hush, Cook's eyes flickered. Well, sir, as we turned to leave, I thought I heard a faint scraping sound, like wood on wood, from above stairs. But it stopped as soon as we paused. Evans's brow furrowed. Yes, I heard it too. It came from the gallery, like someone moving a chair. Poirot's eyes brightened. A clue of sound. Excellent. He turned to Hargrave. We must inspect the gallery and second-floor landing for signs of passage. As Hargrave hurried to secure the area, Poirot examined the floorboards near the music room threshold. A faint smudge of dust caught his gaze. An ochre powder not unlike violin rosin, but too sparse to have fallen from extensive handling. Note this, Poirot said to Conti. A trace of rosin dust here, yet none inside the case. It suggests that the bow was perhaps tested for stability by someone handling it before slipping it away. Conti gasped. Someone tried it before they took it? Poirot inclined his head. Yes, to ensure its readiness. Our suspect is a musician at heart, or at least intimately familiar with the tools of the trade. He rose and surveyed the room's entrances. For now we have ruled out a forcible break-in. We have a clue of sound on the landing, a smudge of rosin, and a suspect with both knowledge and motive. Let us proceed to canvass each guest and staff member, retracing their paths and examining any familiarity with musical instruments. Lord Ashcroft drew a deep breath. Then we begin our true investigation, questioning those who share the confidence of these walls. Poirot smiled, a spark of determination in his dark eyes. Indeed, mon ami, the empty case has spoken its secret. Now we must listen to the voices behind it. Chapter 3. The Gathering of Suspects. By mid-morning, the breadth of Ashcroft Manor's drawing room had been repurposed into an impromptu examination chamber. Velvet-upholstered settees formed a semicircle facing a small table upon which rested Signora Conti's empty bow case, a fine brush for gathering dust, and Constable Hargrave's notebook. A hush prevailed as Poirot, standing with impeccable posture and cane in hand, surveyed the assembled guests, each a potential piece in the puzzle. Lady Ashcroft, still pale from last night's turmoil, sat nearest the bow case. Lord Ashcroft stood behind her, his brow furrowed with paternal concern. Opposite them, Colonel Fitzwilliam leaned forward, military bearing lending gravity to his every movement. Miss Edith Maitland clutched her reticule, eyes wide, but determined. Lady Beatrice Langley perched gracefully on the edge of her seat, while Lady Sloane lounged in measured repose, parasol folded in her lap. Lastly, Mr. Ambrose Sinclair, cane in hand, exuded polished calm. Poirot raised a gloved finger. Mesdames et messieurs, the case before us has taught that opportunity combined with knowledge breeds the perfect crime. We have learned the bow was taken silently, with expert care. Now, I invite each of you to recount your presence in and about the music room yesterday between 5 and 6 o'clock. He nodded to Lady Langley. Lady Langley smoothed her lilac gown. I was rehearsing my accompaniment for Signora Conti in the adjacent salon until precisely 5:15. Then, as tea was announced, I placed my sheet music here. She tapped the table and joined the others. She paused. I did not return until after dinner. Poirot nodded. Thank you, madame. Your sheet music lay undisturbed when I arrived. He turned to Colonel Fitzwilliam. Colonel, you escorted Miss Maitland during the earlier rehearsal, yes? The Colonel inclined his head. Indeed. We walked together from the billiard room at 5:10 through the gallery toward the music room. I paused outside the door, ensuring Madame Maitland's comfort, then departed for a stroll along the terrace. He pressed his lips. I did not re-enter the wing until dinner. Miss Maitland drew in a steadying breath. "Colonel Fitzwilliam is correct," she said softly. I arrived at 5:10 and rehearsed my piano section until the servant rang the bell. I then departed to prepare Signora Conti's tea tray. She glanced at the door. I passed through the corridor at 5:20. No one else was there. Poirot's eyes glittered. "Noted. The corridor was quiet, you say?" She nodded. "I heard only the wind in the magnolias." He moved to Lady Sloane. "Madame, where were you between 5 and 6? Lady Sloane's parasol tapped her lap. "I was in the conservatory, admiring the new orchid display. I returned to the drawing room at 5:50 for tea." She arched an eyebrow. "I did not approach the music room." Poirot recorded the detail. "Very good. And Mr. Sinclair?" Sinclair shifted in his seat. "I was inspecting the display of rare rose varieties in Lord Ashcroft's gallery until 5:30. I then escorted Lady Langley, who declined, and proceeded here." He tapped the arm of his chair. "I did not enter the music room." Poirot smiled thinly. "Observe that rose arrangement closely," he suggested. "Its petals are pristine, but I collected a single dusting of ochre powder at its base." Gasps rose around the room. Lady Ashcroft leaned forward. "Ochre powder, like rosin?" Poirot nodded. "Precisely. A trace of rosin dust was found on the rose display, and here," he indicated the tray brush, "near the bow case. It suggests our suspect carried residues from the instruments into other rooms." He paused to let the implications settle, then addressed the group as a whole. "Thus, the thief moved between the music room and the gallery, and possibly beyond. Opportunity lay with any of you possessing familiarity with both wings." He tapped his cane. "Yet motive remains obscured. We must now consider emotional incentives." He turned to Lord Ashcroft. "My lord, who among us might benefit most from the cancellation of Signora Conti's performance?" Lord Ashcroft frowned. "Her concert was not a fundraiser for my estate, yet it was intended to draw society's attention to Ashcroft Manor. Its failure would be a serious embarrassment." He looked to Lady Ashcroft. "My wife and I wished to cement our social standing. This concert was central to that plan." Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Ashcroft. "Madame, does anyone here have cause to resent a flourish of acclaim upon your house?" Lady Ashcroft swallowed. "No, yet perhaps those with fragile pride, unwilling to share the spotlight." Lady Sloane's parasol flicked. "Society's stage is fickle. One scandal at a performance will eclipse any fame." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Indeed, but we seek one who would lure that scandal." He turned to Miss Maitland. "Madam, did you observe any tension between the guests and the Signora this week?" Miss Maitland hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Only that Mr. Sinclair questioned her choice of repertoire, and Lady Sloane wondered why her own musical connections were overlooked." She glanced at each suspect. Everyone desired prominence. Poirot nodded. "So our perpetrator combined expert knowledge of instruments with opportunity in the corridor and gallery, and yet also harbored personal motive tied to recognition, or its absence." He tapped the gallery floor. "We shall now examine each room in turn, gathering traces and timelines, until we close upon the one whose harmony was fractured by envy or fear." He raised his hand, drawing the company to their feet. "Mesdames et messieurs, let us proceed. Each doorway Each piece of evidence brings us closer to unveiling the missing bow and the heart that wished it hidden. Chapter 4. Poirot's Entrance. A subtle hush fell over the drawing room when the heavy double doors swung open to admit Hercule Poirot. Even at a distance, his impeccably waxed moustaches and meticulously tailored grey suit announced his arrival. He paused in the doorway, cane in hand, surveying the assembled company with a serene expression. The flicker of candlelight across his small, dark eyes revealed a mind already at work. Constable Hargrave stepped forward, brushing imaginary dust from his tunic. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, bowing slightly, "thank you for arriving so promptly." Poirot inclined his head. "Constable, please call me simply Poirot. I trust you have managed thus far." Hargrave nodded. "We have secured the music room and the gallery. Traces of rosin and a trail of petals have been noted." He gestured to the bow case and the scattered magnolia blossoms resting in a low vase. "But we require your little grey cells to bind these clues into a solution." "My pleasure," Poirot replied, stepping fully into the room. "May I?" He gestured toward the central table. Hargrave moved aside, allowing Poirot to approach the empty bow case. He ran his gloved finger along the rim of the velvet lining. Notice how the velvet remains unmarked. No clasp, scratches, no displaced fibers. The bow was removed with great care. He looked up at the assembled guests. Such finesse suggests a thief intimate with this object's value and handling. Lady Ashcroft, seated nearest the table, rose gracefully. "Will you require further assistance from us, monsieur?" she asked, voice steady despite the tension lingering in her pale features. "Indeed, madame." Poirot smiled in reassurance. "I shall question each of you briefly. Already you have given me your timelines. But first, allow me to observe manner and comportment." He turned to Colonel Fitzwilliam. "Colonel, you have watched many officers break under stress. What do you observe in Miss Maitland?" The Colonel's gaze flicked to the governess. Miss Maitland, cheeks flushed, clutched her reticule tighter. The Colonel answered quietly, "She betrays a natural anxiety, yet determination as well. Her hands tremble, but her back remains straight." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. He stepped to Lady Langley. "Madame, your posture is elegant, though your eyes shift to the doors, a sign of concern. You fear a repeat of last night's disturbances." Lady Langley offered a calm nod. "I admit I am anxious, yet I would not impede justice." "Honesty," Poirot murmured, "is often unveiled by the slightest gesture." He paced slowly before Lady Sloane, who reclined in her armchair. The parasol in her lap clicked against the floor as she shifted. "Madam Sloane, you appear amused, an indication you appreciate society's theatre even in turmoil." Lady Sloane's lips curved in a knowing smile. "Detective, one must admit that a scandal at a concert confers its own peculiar thrill." Poirot allowed a small smile. "Very perceptive. Yet tonight we shall replace thrill with clarity." He turned to Mr. Sinclair, who straightened his tie. "Monsieur Sinclair, your measured calm suggests both self-control and, perhaps, a hidden edge of resolve." Sinclair inclined his head. "I seek only to clear my name, monsieur." "Of course," Poirot replied, tucking his cane under his arm. "We shall see." He returned to the bow case. "Now, mes amis, the formal inquiry." He gestured to Lady Ashcroft. "Madame, would you recount once more your discovery of the missing bow?" Lady Ashcroft's voice was firm. "I found the case empty at precisely 6:05 upon entering to prepare Signora Conti's bench." She paused. "I was alone, no servants present." Very well. Poirot made a note. Colonel Fitzwilliam, you described passing this room at that hour. Did you hear or see anything unusual? The colonel's brows furrowed. Only a faint scraping sound, as though a chair had been moved, followed by silence. Poirot nodded, then turned to Miss Maitland. Madame, you passed the corridor at 5:20. Did you notice any scent? Perhaps the aroma of magnolia or jasmine? Miss Maitland's eyes widened. Yes, I thought I smelled jasmine drifting from the conservatory. Excellent, Poirot said, lifting a glass stopper from the rose display vase. He inhaled subtly. A hint of bergamot as well. Someone carried perfume between rooms, an olfactory signature. He next faced Lady Langley. Madame, did you apply new fragrance before your rehearsal? Her complexion shifted. I tried a new bergamot scent to steady my nerves, she admitted. Poirot tapped his cane. Thus, petals, rosin, scent. Each clue weaves a path through these halls. He paused to let the group reflect. Now, Monsieur Sinclair, consider your visit to the gallery's rose display. You applied your gloves there? Sinclair grimaced. Yes, I donned gloves to examine thorns, unaware the rosin dust might cling. At once plausible and revealing, Poirot murmured. And Lady Sloane, your maid's presence in the study, did you note her agitation? Lady Sloane frowned. Clara Matthews seemed nervous, avoided my gaze. Another thread, Poirot said. He straightened, sweeping his gaze over the company. Mesdames et messieurs, each of you has left a mark, physical, olfactory, or psychological. Tonight we begin collecting these marks as pieces of a mosaic. Tomorrow we shall view the completed picture, and the identity of our thief will become clear. With that declaration, Poirot sheathed his notebook. He inclined his head. For now, retire to your chambers, remain accessible, and ponder the harmony of truth awaiting our next movement. As the guests dispersed, Poirot stood alone by the bell case. His cane tapped twice on the floor, a metronome counting toward the revelation he would orchestrate with precise, elegant resolution. Chapter 5. Initial Interviews. Begin late morning found Ashcroft Manor's library transformed into a quiet antechamber of inquiry. The tall windows admitted soft daylight onto rows of leather-bound volumes, while a small round table bore Signora Conti's recovered bow-case, now empty once more, and a carafe of water beside two chairs. Constable Hargrave and Hercule Poirot stood by the table, awaiting the arrival of each interviewee in turn. Mon ami, Poirot observed, we must approach these interviews as one collects delicate blooms, gently, systematically, and without bruising the petals. He patted his moustaches thoughtfully. Let us begin with Lady Ashcroft. Lady Ashcroft entered, composed yet obviously burdened. She offered a slight curtsy before seating herself. Poirot seated opposite and poured her a glass of water. Madame, he began softly, yesterday evening you discovered the bow's absence at 6:05. What did you notice then, beyond the empty case? Lady Ashcroft sipped and set the glass down. I recall the hush of the library downstairs, no footfall, no voices. When I returned here, the case lay open. I felt a subtle chill, as if the manor itself held its breath. Poirot leaned forward. A perceptive detail. And you mentioned earlier that your maid, Clara, seemed unsettled. Did you question her? Lady Ashcroft shook her head. I only asked if she had cleaned these rooms. She said yes, then hurried away. Her eyes glistened. I regretted not pressing her further, but I feared what she might reveal. Very well. Poirot made a small note. Thank you, madame. He rose and gestured to Colonel Fitzwilliam, who entered next, crisply attired. Colonel, Poirot greeted. "Your knowledge of routine is invaluable. You told us you paused outside the music room door at 5:30. Did you hear anything?" The Colonel ran a hand through his hair. I heard a soft scraping, wood upon wood, then silence. I entered, found the case closed, presumed Signora Conti had returned early, and withdrew. Poirot tapped his cane. "And when you re-entered for dinner, you found the case open?" "Precisely," the Colonel confirmed. "I glimpsed the empty velvet and raised the alarm." "Excellent." Poirot bowed slightly as the Colonel departed. Next, Miss Edith Maitland glided in, carrying a folded handkerchief. "Mademoiselle Maitland," Poirot said kindly, "you passed this corridor at 5:20. Did you observe anything unusual beyond the scent of magnolia?" Miss Maitland nodded, voice soft. I felt a draught through the slightly ajar window. I paused, thinking I saw movement in the shadows, perhaps a silhouette, but when I approached, nothing remained. Poirot's eyes brightened. "A fleeting shape, likely our culprit, startled by your approach." He tapped his notebook. "And the window itself, was it open when you left?" "Yes," she replied, cheeks colouring. "I closed it before hurrying on." "Very good." Poirot offered her a reassuring smile. After she left, he signalled for Lady Beatrice Langley to enter. Lady Langley settled into the chair with elegant poise. "Madame," Poirot began, "you noted the sheet music in the music room was turned upside down after the incident. When did you last touch those pages?" Her fingers trembled slightly. "At rehearsal, around 5:50. I arranged them precisely, left the room, and only returned after Signora Conti's distress. Then I found them reversed." Poirot nodded. A deliberate act of misdirection, ensuring our eyes lingered on the pages rather than the case. He made a note. "Thank you, madame." Lady Langley rose and departed. Next, Lady Sloane strolled in, parasol in hand. She settled with an amused lift of her chin. "Lady Sloane," Poirot said, "you observed Clara Matthews near the study door last evening. What did you make of her demeanour?" Lady Sloane tapped the table lightly. She fidgeted with the draperies, avoiding my gaze. When I asked about the missing bow, she feigned ignorance. I suspect she feared involvement. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "A useful observation, thank you." Finally, Mr. Ambrose Sinclair entered with a respectful nod. He removed his gloves and placed them on the table. "Monsieur Sinclair," Poirot began, "these gloves bear a faint dusting of rosin. You said you handled them in the gallery's rose display. Why did you have rosin there?" Sinclair swallowed. "I fetched my gloves after examining the flowers. I did not realize they carried any residue." He paused, "But I did visit the music room briefly, at about 5:45, to admire the instruments." Poirot regarded him steadily. "Briefly, but enough to leave traces." He tapped the rosin specks. "Your curiosity is clear, yet the careful placement of that dust suggests vengeance or protection, aligned with motive beyond simple interest." Sinclair frowned. "I merely wished to familiarize myself with the bow before the concert. I had none of the foul motives you imply." Poirot inclined his head. "We shall explore every possibility." He rose, signalling the end of the round of interviews. Drawing a breath, Poirot addressed Hargrave. "Constable, we have mapped the interviews. Each suspect possessed opportunity and varying motive. Now we must collate these testimonies with the physical clues, rosin, petals, creased music, and prepare for our next step, tracking the thief's precise path through Ashcroft Manor." He turned to leave the library, pausing at the door. "Mon invité," he added, "alert the household. No one may leave until further notice." As Hargrave hurried to comply, Poirot's small smile hinted at satisfaction. His methodical interviews had sown the seeds of revelation, and the next chapter of the affair awaited his unfolding detective genius. Chapter 6. The Petal Trail. Dawn broke slow and grey across Ashcroft Manor. Mists curled like hesitant thoughts above the dew-wet hedges, and magnolia petals, those delicate saboteurs, lay scattered across the eastern corridor, trailing like a breadcrumb path from the conservatory to the music room. Poirot, cane in hand, stood at the threshold of the long hallway, his gaze sharp, his movements deliberate. Constable Hargrave joined him silently, arms folded, his notebook already open. "You see, mon ami," Poirot murmured, "a petal is not merely a flower's farewell, it is also a map, if one knows how to read it." The two men walked the corridor slowly, eyes scanning floor and moulding. Petals, faintly bruised by a soft sole, dotted the parquet with gentle irregularity. Poirot stooped once, gloved fingers lifting a single petal. Its edge was torn, caught, perhaps, on a heel or cane. He held it beneath his nose, inhaling faint jasmine and something fainter still, sandalwood and bergamot, clinging like a forgotten note of music. "The scent," Poirot whispered, "lingers as surely as motive. And scent, like motive, must be placed." The corridor opened into the conservatory, where glass-panelled walls allowed morning light to bathe the tropical blooms. Lady Sloane's orchids swayed gently above their marble pedestal, and near the southeast alcove, the floor bore a light smudge. Not dust, but faint rosin, unmistakable to Poirot's experienced eye. "Someone passed through here. In haste," Poirot observed, eyes narrowing. "They paused here. Look." He gestured to a corner shelf beneath the largest magnolia tree. A handkerchief lay partly tucked behind a vase, folded but marked faintly with the initials E.M. Hargrave raised an eyebrow. "Miss Edith Maitland?" Poirot nodded once. Her testimony placed her near here, yet she claimed to pass through without pausing. Curious. They returned to the drawing-room, where Lady Ashcroft now waited beside the hearth, a shawl wrapped tightly about her shoulders. "Monsieur Poirot," she greeted, "you found something?" Poirot offered a small bow. "Indeed, madame, your home offers many voices if one knows how to listen. Petals, perfume, and now, monogrammed linen." Her eyes widened slightly. "Miss Maitland?" "Perhaps." Poirot gestured to the nearby table, where the bow case had once rested. "But evidence is not accusation, madam. We must understand why each element appears, what it sought to disguise or illuminate." He turned as Signora Conti entered the room, her composure now partially restored, though her eyes remained shadowed with unease. "I've spoken with my valet," she said quietly. He confirmed that during rehearsal someone entered the music room, just briefly, and exited before I returned. He thought it was a servant. Poirot's gaze sharpened. A servant, yet no staff reported such movement. Conti hesitated. He did say, the figure was slim, moved quickly, no uniform. Poirot exhaled through his nose, slowly. Then not a servant at all, a guest perhaps, unwatched, but not unseen. Hargrave scribbled rapidly. Poirot tapped his cane once on the floor, a thought crystallizing. "A slender guest," he murmured, passing through the conservatory, scattering petals and traces of scent, familiar with musical placement, motivated not by wealth, but by disruption. He turned back to Lady Ashcroft. "Madame, what can you tell me of Miss Maitland's past?" Lady Ashcroft's brow furrowed. "She came to us by way of the Langley household, accompanist to a cousin, I believe, skilled with the piano but quiet. She rarely speaks of her family." Poirot nodded slowly. "And Lady Langley's rise. perhaps a sore point for one left behind. The room seemed to still around him. Firelight danced against the polished wood. Poirot allowed the silence to stretch just enough. "I shall speak with Miss Maitland again," he said finally, but gently. A heart wounded by exclusion often bleeds into silence, and silence can be more dangerous than rage. He turned to Hargrave. "Constable, secure the conservatory. I wish no further petals disturbed." As Hargrave departed, Poirot looked once more toward the east wing's long corridor, where light from the morning sun struck the polished floor like a blade. "Mon ami," he murmured to himself, "the path grows clearer, and yet the one who walked it still hides behind their own reflection." He moved off with calm, silent purpose. The trail had not ended, only turned, and its final note, like the last bar of a concert, still waited for its crescendo. Chapter 7. Echoes behind closed doors. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the narrow windows of the east wing corridor, painting the polished floorboards in streaks of amber. Poirot paused outside the small sitting room where Miss Edith Maitland awaited him. The door stood slightly ajar, and from within came the faintest scent of bergamot mingled with dust and lavender. He tapped lightly on the frame, announcing his presence, and entered with measured grace. Miss Maitland sat at the writing desk, her back straight and hands folded in her lap. She wore the same simple grey frock as yesterday, though now its hem bore a slight dark stain, perhaps tea spilled in agitation. She stood when Poirot approached, offering a courteous curtsy that trembled at the edges. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began softly, closing the door behind him, "I have come to speak further of the petals, the scent, and the handkerchief we discovered in the conservatory." He gestured to the chair opposite her. "May I sit?" She nodded, though her gaze remained fixed on a point just beyond his shoulder. Poirot seated himself and removed a single magnolia petal from the small leather case tucked into his jacket pocket. He laid it gently upon the desk. "Tell me, Edith," he said, "what thoughts passed through your mind when you first noticed these petals beneath your feet?" Her lips parted, then closed, as if tasting the memory. Finally, she spoke in a low voice. "I thought at first they were fallen by chance, dislodged in the morning's dew. But when I saw the same petals on the torn page of Lady Langley's music, I realized someone carried them deliberately." Poirot inclined his head. "Yes, a signature perhaps, a breadcrumb to mislead or to claim." He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "And your handkerchief, marked E.M. behind the orchid vase. How did it come to rest there?" Miss Maitland's eyes filled with tears she did not shed. She swallowed hard. I lost it in the conservatory when I closed the window against the draught. I did not realize until this afternoon, when I returned to retrieve my gloves." Her voice quavered. "I only went there because I thought Clara might have hidden the bow among the potted plants." "Clara Matthews," Poirot murmured. "Your maid. You suspected her involvement?" She nodded, biting her lip. "I saw her lingering near the study door last evening. When I passed, she looked startled and fled down the corridor. I thought perhaps she took the bow to conceal it." Poirot studied her. "And did you confront Clara?" Miss Maitland shook her head, tears tracing thin paths down her cheeks. "Number Y. I was ashamed to accuse her without proof. I feared I would be seen as overreaching." He allowed a moment of silence to settle between them, broken only by the distant murmur of voices from the main hall. Then he drew from his pocket a small cloth sachet containing a few grains of rosin dust. "Edith, you told me you closed the window in the conservatory at exactly 5:22. Yet we found traces of rosin beneath that same window, as though someone had tested the bow there before taking it. Have you ever handled rosin yourself?" Her cheeks drained of colour. "In practice, yes, but only for violin students at Langley Hall. I never applied it here. I borrowed a pinch when Lady Langley ran late with her accompanist parts, so I could ready the instruments." Poirot's gaze narrowed. A convenient explanation, yet the bow itself bore no fresh rosin marks when stolen. Someone transferred the powder from their hands to the floor, and perhaps to other rooms. She pressed her lips together, glancing briefly at the closed door. "Monsieur, I only wished to protect Signora Conti. I feared she might be harmed if the bow vanished before her performance." Her voice cracked. "I tried to find it myself, but I did not want to alarm the household." "Your intentions noble," Poirot said quietly, "yet the path of worry can lead to unintended deeds." He rose, smoothing his coat. "Tell me sincerely, did you ever contemplate moving the bow to delay the concert? Even briefly?" Miss Maitland's body stiffened. She looked up, tears glinting. "Number I could never betray her trust." She paused, closing her eyes for a moment. "But I did consider hiding it once in the conservatory's tool shed, just until I could ask her privately. I knew the key was left in the lock after rehearsal." Poirot's eyes flicked to the window. "Ah, so you had both the knowledge of the key and the opportunity, and yet you returned it unharmed." She nodded. "When I saw Clara watching me from the hallway, I panicked and put it back. I did not touch the bow itself." He studied her closely. "A telling admission. You were willing to tamper with the case, but not the instrument. Yet you allowed suspicion to drift onto others." He paused, then added kindly, "Edith, what is your greatest fear this day?" Miss Maitland swallowed, voice trembling. "That the truth will never emerge, and that Signora Conti will never forgive me for doubting her, for doubting myself." Poirot offered a gentle smile. "Mon cœur, the truth has many chambers. Yours has been opened honestly. Now let us walk together through the evidence once more, until we find the hand that took the bow and restore harmony to Ashcroft Manor." He stood and extended his hand. She rose, accepting it with relief. As they crossed the carpeted floor toward the conservatory door, Poirot's expression was one of calm determination. Outside, the last magnolia petals drifted like pale confetti across the corridor, awaiting his next careful step into the heart of mystery. Chapter 8. Whispers Beneath the Floorboards. Evening settled over Ashcroft Manor like a velvet drape, muffling footsteps and hollowing corridors with quiet expectation. Poirot descended the grand staircase alone, his cane tapping a steady rhythm upon the polished banister. Each sound seemed amplified in the hush, carrying forward through the gallery and toward the west wing, where the servants' quarters lay hidden behind heavy oaken doors. Tonight, he would consult Clara Matthews. He paused at the landing, where the air grew perceptibly cooler. A single magnolia petal clung to the corner of a step, an errant reminder of the morning's trail. Poirot bent down, retrieved it carefully, and slipped it into his waistcoat pocket. Then, with deliberate poise, he crossed to the servants' corridor and rapped softly on Clara's door. The door opened to reveal the young maid, her uniform crisply starched, her composure strained. Clara's eyes widened at the sight of the famous detective, and her hands trembled as she clutched a cleaning cloth to her bosom. Miss Matthews, Poirot greeted gently. You have been most attentive to your duties this day. Yet I find that attendance to detail can conceal as much as it reveals. May I enter? Clara swallowed, stepping back to allow him inside. He observed the small chamber by the dim glow of an oil lamp, a narrow bed, a single chair, and a polished washstand with a spotless mirror. Everything was meticulously arranged, except for one object on the floor, a slender strip of violin rosin, as though fallen from a careless hand. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Tell me, Clara, how came this fragment to rest here? She glanced down, cheeks reddening. I was polishing the music-room door earlier, monsieur. A bit of dust must have fallen from the case when I passed by. I picked up everything afterward, I swear. He picked up the rosin shard with a gloved finger and examined it. Dust indeed, but you erased most of it. Yet these flakes remained. And tell me of your movements last night between 6 and 7. Clara's lower lip quivered. I was setting out trays in the servants' hall, sir. Then I heard Lady Sloane's voice in the library. I paused to bow my head as she passed. I did not enter. Precisely, Poirot murmured. And during that hour the bow vanished. You believe it was taken by someone of rank who would not enter servant spaces, yet you too had opportunity when the household gathered below. She looked away, tears welling in her eyes. I would never steal from Signora Conti. She is kind. She once lent me her veil when I grew cold during rehearsal. Poirot inclined his head. Kindness does not preclude desperation, but you have an admirable loyalty. Now another question. Did you notice Miss Maitland in the corridors last night? Clara paused, recalling. Yes. I saw her near the conservatory door around 6:30. She seemed to be searching for something. A flicker of surprise crossed Poirot's face. Indeed? She told me she returned only to retrieve gloves, but perhaps she came to verify a theory. Clara nodded uncertainly. She glanced toward the music room once, then hurried away when she saw me. Poirot folded his hands. Thank you, Clara. You may rest now. Let no one disturb you before morning. As he turned to leave, Clara whispered, Monsieur, I found this in the music room, near the harpsichord. She handed him a single white pearl from Signora Conti's hairpin. Poirot accepted the pearl, examining its smooth surface. A telling token. Someone brushed past the violinist's persona, their touch betraying more than they knew. He slipped the pearl into his pocket and offered a reassuring nod. Good night, Miss Matthews. Outside, the corridor felt emptier than before. Poirot paused, listening. Faint laughter drifted from the drawing room, Lady Sloane entertaining Colonel Fitzwilliam, and the distant scrape of a chair signalled Lady Langley practising late. Yet beneath these sounds, a subtler vibration hummed, a secret beating within the manor's walls. He retraced his steps toward the gallery, descending to the main floor. There, beneath the portraits of Ashcroft ancestors, he paused once more to survey the rose display. The petals were pristine now, but the faintest dust of rosin lingered in the crevices of the marble base. Next to it lay an elegantly folded glove, singletree monogram visible in silver thread. Poirot crouched and picked up the glove, turning it over in his hand. Ambrose Sinclair, he mused. You claimed ignorance of rosin's presence, yet here your glove rests, unwashed, as a signpost. He pocketed the glove, rose, and talismanic tokens, the magnolia petal, the pearl, the glove, converging evidence within his mind's quiet halls. The next step lay clear: confront Mr. Sinclair with this trifecta. But first, he would observe Lady Sloane's manner one final time. Crossing to the drawing room, he found her seated by the fire, parasol closed at her side, a smirk playing on her lips as she recounted an anecdote to the colonel. She spotted Poirot's approach and rose in a flutter of silk. "Monsieur!" she exclaimed. "I had no idea you were still about." "Madame," Poirot replied gravely, "a detective never truly retires until the final piece is placed." He extended the pearl. "Perhaps you will explain how you came to wear this identical ornament this evening?" Lady Sloane's eyes flickered. She touched her hair, feigning surprise. "My dear, that is Signora Conti's pearl. Stolen, I believe, when the beau vanished." Poirot let the silence stretch. "Indeed. And yet you have more than one advance performance tonight." He tapped the glove in his coat pocket. "And one of your guests offered a convenient display, Ambrose Sinclair's glove, dusted with rosin." Her composure faltered. "Monsieur, this is absurd." "And this," he said, producing the magnolia petal, "fell from Lady Langley's frock as she hurried past the staircase just after you heard scraping beneath your window." Lady Sloane's colour drained. "You—" Poirot raised a finger. "The stage is set, madame. Soon each actor will step forward to claim their part, confession or exoneration. For now, rest assured, all. Whispers beneath these floorboards will soon rise to voice." He turned and left her among that crackling hearth, the echoes of revelation already stirring through Ashcroft Manor's silent corridors. Chapter 9. The Unravelling of Silken Threads. The Manor's hush deepened as moonlight filtered through leaded glass, casting fractured reflections upon the polished floor. Poirot moved with deliberate economy, each step guided by the constellation of clues he carried. The crushed magnolia petal, the pearl, the rosin-dusted glove. He ascended the wide staircase to the gallery, where the portraits of Ashcroft ancestors gazed down like silent adjudicators. There, beneath the grand portrait of Lord Ashcroft's great-grandfather, he found Lady Langley reclining on a chaise longue, sheet music splayed across her lap. "Madame," he began without preamble, "may I join you?" She looked up, startled, but composed. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot, though I confess surprise at the hour." He seated himself, placing the petal on the small side table. "I come to offer you an opportunity for candour. The petals you scattered this morning were not mere accident." Lady Langley's eyes widened, but she remained silent. Poirot continued, voice gentle but insistent. "Your passion for the Signora's performance runs deep, as does your resentment at being overshadowed by her renown." She drew a shaky breath. "Monsieur, He produced the pearl. "And this, found in Clara Matthews's quarters, yet unmistakably one of Signora Conti's own hairpins." Lady Langley's composure cracked. "It fell when I brushed past her dressing-room door. I panicked when I discovered the bow missing and sought to delay the concert until I might prove my own importance." He nodded. "You admit you intended to hide the bow, briefly, to engineer a crisis of confidence in your rival?" She bowed her head. "Yes, but I never considered it would spiral so far. I thought, if the performance were postponed, society's attention would turn to Lady Langley's benefit concert next month." Poirot leaned back, expression calm. "Your motive, envy, was clear. Yet you are not the one who removed the bow with such careful precision, nor tested it before taking it." Tears spilled now. "Then who?" I only touched the case. I saw Colonel Fitzwilliam near the music room after the rehearsal. He had no uniform, and I mistook him for a guest." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Indeed. But Colonel Fitzwilliam's alibi is secure. The true culprit is closer to home." Outside the gallery door, a faint shuffle, a breath held in the corridor, alerted Poirot's keen ear. He rose and held up a gloved hand. Remain here, madame. He slipped into the corridor, cane tapping softly. At the far end, shadows shifted. A figure hesitated outside the library. Poirot advanced, voice low yet commanding. Monsieur Sinclair. The man straightened, guilt and defiance battling across his features. He wore one glove. The other, dusted with rosin, lay hidden in his breast pocket. Poirot retrieved it. You underestimated the perspicacity of Magnolia's path and Bergamot's perfume. You thought the theft would appear as the footwork of a servant or a misguided guest. Sinclair's shoulders slumped. I meant only to protect Signora Conti from a rival's sabotage. I suspected Lady Langley had tampered with the case. I intended to hide the bow until she confessed. And in doing so, Poirot said softly, you became no less a thief. You tested the bow for stability in the conservatory, your gloves taking rosin from the instruments. You brushed past Signora Conti's dressing room, dislodging her pearl. You carried magnolia petals from the east wing in your coat as you pursued your quest for justice. He stepped closer. Your motive was honorable, misguided as it was, but the law cares little for intent when trust is broken. Sinclair met his gaze. I see that now. I never meant harm beyond humiliation of the true culprit. Poirot inclined his head. The time for humiliation has passed. The time for restoration has come. He guided Sinclair back into the gallery where Lady Langley waited. She rose, tension palpable. Madame, Poirot announced to both, you two conspired, one to postpone a performance for personal gain, the other to conceal that act under the guise of righteousness. The missing bow, though intact, will be returned to Signora Conti, and the concert will proceed. Lady Langley's shoulders sagged in relief. Sinclair bowed his head in contrition. Poirot continued, voice gentle yet firm. Let this night remind us that honor and ambition dance a delicate minuet. One misstep, and the harmony shatters. As they departed toward the music room, Poirot lingered beneath the portrait of the stern Ashcroft ancestor. He pressed the period, petal between the pages of his notebook, closing the chapter on envy and vindication. Beyond the corridors, the manor exhaled. Behind closed doors, hearts eased, and in the moonlit gallery, the echoes of silken threads, once entwined in deceit, fell silent at last. Chapter 10. The Return of the Heirloom. Morning light filtered gently through the tall windows of the music room, gilding every surface with honeyed warmth. Signora Conti stood at the centre, her midnight blue gown catching the light as she cradled her restored violin bow in delicate hands. Her eyes, sharp, poised, followed Hercule Poirot as he entered, cane in hand and moustaches impeccably waxed. Around her, the assembled company, Lord and Lady Ashcroft, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Lady Langley, Miss Maitland, Mr. Sinclair, Lady Sloane, and Constable Hargrave, fell silent, hearts quickening at the promise of resolution. Poirot inclined his head. Signora, your bow is unharmed and ready for tonight's concert. Let us return it to its rightful place. Conti stepped forward, placing the bow upon the velvet lining of its case. She closed the lid and lifted it, voice steady, yet threaded with relief. Monsieur Poirot, I cannot express my gratitude. This instrument is more than wood and horsehair. It is the vessel of my voice. Its absence felt like a silence beneath my ribs. He offered a gentle smile. Music must be heard, Signora. Tonight, the world will hear you once more. As the case closed, a soft click echoed like a final note. Lord Ashcroft exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. Lady Ashcroft moved to his side, laying a reassuring hand upon his arm. Colonel Fitzwilliam and Miss Maitland exchanged relieved glances, their ordeal at last resolved. Only Lady Sloane remained at the margin, a cool smile playing upon her lips as she observed the unfolding scene. Poirot turned to address the room. Mesdames et messieurs, the bow's disappearance was orchestrated by two among you. Lady Beatrice Langley, who sought to delay the performance for her own benefit, and Mr. Ambrose Sinclair, who endeavoured to conceal that act under the guise of justice. Both have confessed and expressed sincere regret. Lady Langley's gaze dropped to the floor, her voice barely a whisper. I allowed envy to guide me. I apologize to Signora Conti and to you all. Sinclair bowed his head. My intentions were misguided, but my methods unjust. I, too, apologize. Signora Conti inclined her head graciously. I forgive you both. The true art lies not in vengeance, but in compassion. She extended her hand to Lady Langley. Come, join me tonight on stage. Lady Langley rose and accepted the gesture, colour returning to her cheeks. The room brightened as forgiveness bloomed, tension dissolving into unity. Poirot surveyed the company, noting subtle shifts, a hand loosely clasped, a foot tapping in eager anticipation. Tonight's concert will proceed as planned, he proclaimed, but let this day remind us, trust, once broken, may be mended by truth and humility. He paused, turning to Constable Hargrave. Ensure that no further incidents disturb the instruments, and inform the orchestra that our prima donna requires nothing more than calm and favour. Hargrave nodded and departed, leaving the group to gather around the harpsichord. Signora Conti lifted her violin and bowed to the small audience. Colonel Fitzwilliam offered her an encouraging nod. Miss Maitland adjusted the bench cushion, her own performance awaiting her. Lord Ashcroft cleared his throat and sank into an armchair, brass rail of the case set aside like a barrier now removed. As the first notes trembled into the air, soft, haunting, then swelling into a swirl of devotion, Poirot retreated to the back of the room. He leaned upon his cane, eyes closed, savouring the intertwining voices of violin and piano. The music flowed like a river of gold, carrying away the events of the past days and bathing the manor in renewal. When the final chord rang out, a crystalline echo reverberating through the rafters, the assembled company erupted in applause. Signora Conti lowered her violin, face radiant. Lady Langley and Mr. Sinclair joined her, sharing a moment of collective triumph and redemption. Poirot stepped forward, guiding his small grey cells toward the next mystery that would stir the manor's hush. For tonight, however, the symphony of confession, forgiveness, and restored harmony would linger in every corner. And in the wake of that music, Ashcroft Manor stood reaffirmed. Even a shattered prelude can yield a triumphant finale. Chapter 11. Whispers in the Library. The morning after the triumphant concert dawned pale and still, as if the manor itself paused to savour the echoes of last night's music. Through the tall library windows, a soft mist curled across the gravel drive, and the great oaken shelves stood silent sentinels over leather-bound tomes. Poirot entered alone, cane tapping precisely on the oriental rug, each step a careful measure in a dance of observation. Lord Ashcroft stood by the fireplace, polishing the silver-mounted case that had contained Signora Conti's bow. His brow was furrowed, as though the weight of yesterday's scandal lingered in his thoughts. Lady Ashcroft sat in an armchair nearby, her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes cast toward the window. Both flinched at Poirot's arrival. "Mon ami," Lord Ashcroft greeted, voice low. "Thank you for joining us so early." Poirot inclined his head. The resolution of one crisis often reveals the presence of another. He gestured toward Lady Ashcroft. "Madame, you wish to speak with me?" Lady Ashcroft rose, smoothing her gown. She crossed the room to a small writing desk, where a single sheet of parchment lay, its edges crisp as if freshly cut. "I received this note under my door just after dawn," she said, picking it up and handing it to Poirot. He examined the paper, fine linen stock, inked in a graceful hand. The message read, "The harmony you restored last night masks a deeper discord. Meet me in the gallery at midnight if you wish to learn the truth of Ashcroft Manor's legacy." Poirot's dark eyes narrowed. A summons penned under the veil of secrecy. Note the choice of harmony and discord, musical allusions echoing our previous affair. Lady Ashcroft shivered. But who would write such a thing? And why? Her voice trembled. "Let us consider our circle," Poirot mused. "Last night's concert united these guests in relief, yet each retains a secret chord, a hidden motive, a dormant resentment." He tapped the note. "And one among them seeks an answer to a question unasked." He moved toward the central bookcase, lifting a weighty volume on local history. Behind it, a narrow gap yawned, a hidden panel, slightly ajar. Poirot's cane tapped at the threshold. "Observe, my friends, the architecture of secrets. Ashcroft Manor was built with passages to guard more than mere valuables." Lord Ashcroft rushed forward, alarm flickering. "I was unaware of this corridor." Poirot pressed the hidden latch, and the panel swung inward, revealing a dim passage lined with ancient stone. Faint draughts whispered through its recesses. "This corridor runs behind the gallery and leads, I believe, to the old servants' wing. It would afford clandestine movement unseen by those in the grand rooms above." He pointed. "Your midnight visitor intends to exploit such a route." Lady Ashcroft laid a trembling hand on Poirot's arm. "I feared there was no further intrigue after last night. Yet this—" Her voice trailed off. Poirot nodded. "The theft of the bow was but the prelude. Now someone seeks to unearth history intentionally buried, and will use fear to compel attention." He turned to Lord Ashcroft. "My lord, do you recall any dispute over the manor's past? Any mention of long-forgotten scandals?" Lord Ashcroft frowned. "There was my great-uncle Percival, rumoured to have hidden ill-gotten jewels here, but the story was dismissed as rumour. A rumour you never pursued until now." Poirot swept the library with his gaze. "This note arrives when value's memory stirs. The conspirator wishes to force your hand." Lady Ashcroft's eyes brimmed. "Then we must reveal ourselves to this messenger." "Not yet." Poirot pointed to the passage. "We prepare. Tonight at midnight someone will slip through here. I propose we wait, unobserved, within the gallery. Let the false midnight meeting occur. Then we unmask our provocateur." Lady Ashcroft hesitated. "But to leave the manor's security in question—" Poirot laid a reassuring hand upon her shoulder. "Fear not. We shall place ourselves like hidden strings behind the stage, ready to draw taut when the time is right." He signalled to Constable Hargrave, who had been summoned. "Arrange for discreet watches at the gallery entrance, under cover, and inform Signora Conti of this affair. Her insight into melody and silence may prove invaluable." Hargrave bowed, hurrying away. Poirot turned back to the open panel. "Meanwhile, I shall explore the depths of this corridor. Who knows what relics of shame or treasure lie concealed? Each step in these stone halls may yield a clue to our midnight enigma." Lady Ashcroft pressed the note to her breast. "Thank you, Poirot. I pray this does not lead to greater peril." He gave her a small smile. Every question carries risk, madame. But it is better to confront the shadow than to live entombed in its whisper. As the dawn light climbed higher in the library, Poirot paused at the threshold of the hidden passage. Behind, closed. Doors, secrets waited, and at midnight they would find their voice. Chapter 12. Midnight's Secret Passage. Night fell with an almost palpable hush over Ashcroft Manor. The grand corridors lay deserted, their crystal chandeliers unlit, as if the house itself held its breath. In the gallery, under the watchful gaze of Lord Ashcroft's ancestral portraits, a single lantern glowed, its flame flickering against polished wood. Behind the heavy drapes, Constable Hargrave and two steady-eyed footmen waited, rifles at the ready. At Poirot's silent signal, they melted into shadowed corners. In the dimness, Hercule Poirot stood beside Lady Ashcroft, who trembled in her embroidered silk dressing gown. She clutched the mysterious linen note, its promise of discord still echoing in her mind. Signora Conti hovered nearby, violet silk train pooled at her feet, a small velvet reticule in her hand. Even at rest, the violinist's gaze remained alert, as though she could hear the faintest whisper of footsteps. "We must be patient," Poirot murmured. "Midnight approaches. Our visitor will think these halls empty, ripe for secret counsel." A grandfather clock in the adjacent conservatory struck 11. Each sonorous toll seemed magnified against the silence. Lady Ashcroft swallowed. What if no one comes? "Then we shall seek them in the hidden corridor," Poirot replied softly. "But I trust they will honor their own summons, for fear and curiosity conspire to draw them here." At the stroke of 12, a muted click echoed from the gallery's far end. The panel beneath the portrait of Percival Ashcroft swung inward, revealing the narrow, stone-lined passage Poirot had discovered. A slender figure pressed through, silhouetted by lantern light, steps cautious. Poirot slipped into the deeper shadows, allowing Lady Ashcroft and Signora Conti to remain under the soft lantern glow. The small party waited as the intruder, gloved hand extending to secure the panel, emerged into the gallery. She stood for a moment in the lantern's glow, Clara Matthews, her maid's uniform smudged with dust, eyes wide with fear and resolve. In her trembling hand, she held a small pouch, heavy with weight. "Clara?" Lady Ashcroft's voice wavered. "You wrote the note?" Clara's lips quivered. She nodded once, stepping forward. "Please, I beg your pardon, madam. I had no choice." Poirot stepped into the circle of light, his presence calm yet unyielding. "Monsieur," he said, addressing the pouch, "if you will, place it on the table." With shaky fingers, Clara laid the pouch before them. Lady Ashcroft hesitated, then untied the cord. Inside lay a handful of glittering jewels, pearls, emeralds, and a small gold locket, enchanted by age. Signora Conti's pearl hairpin was nestled among them, along with a single magnolia petal pressed between two rubies. Clara's voice quavered. These were hidden in the manor generations ago by Lord Percival Ashcroft. The family believed them lost after his disgrace. My grandmother was a housekeeper here at that time. She knew where he hid them. When I learned of the Beau's theft and the subsequent plot, I feared the estate would fall deeper into scandal. I meant to remind Lord Ashcroft of his heritage, restore these heirlooms, not steal them. Lady Ashcroft pressed a hand to her mouth. Lord Ashcroft stepped forward, pale in the lantern light. "You risked everything to preserve family honor." Clara's shoulders shook. "Yes, sir. I could not bear to see your name sullied again." Poirot examined the jewels, lifting the locket and opening it to reveal a faded miniature portrait of Percival Ashcroft. "Your loyalty is admirable," he said quietly, "yet secrecy breeds suspicion. You sought to right a wrong by committing another deception." Clara's tears fell freely. "I'm sorry. I only wish to save the manor from disgrace." Signora Conti moved to Clara's side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Lady Ashcroft, these are treasures indeed, but hidden for a reason. Their story must be told openly, not whispered in the dark." Lady Ashcroft drew in a trembling breath. "You are right. Father, we must bring these into the light." Lord Ashcroft nodded, dignity restored by Clara's honesty. He turned to Poirot. "Thank you for guiding us through these shadows. We shall arrange a proper display in the gallery and publish the true history of Percival's fall and redemption." Poirot inclined his head. "The past is never truly lost, only waiting to be discovered. Honesty, once unearthed, can reconcile even the deepest fissures." As the hidden panel swung closed and the lantern's glow expanded to fill the gallery, the assembled household felt a new warmth. The treasures lay open upon the table, their secret kept at last, and in the stillness of midnights. Aftermath, Ashcroft Manor embraced its legacy, flawed yet whole, and the echoes of hidden passageways faded into memory. Chapter 13. A Symphony of Shadows. The morning sun filtered through the great stained glass window of the gallery, casting fractured prisms of colour across the newly arranged display of Percival Ashcroft's recovered jewels. Lord Ashcroft stood before the glass case, his posture rigid with propriety, even as a subtle tremor of relief softened his stern features. Lady Ashcroft joined him, her delicate fingers brushing the cold brass railing that kept visitors at respectful distance from their family's reclaimed past. Hercule Poirot entered with measured steps, cane tapping ever so lightly. He surveyed the scene, a harmonious arrangement of pearls, emeralds, and the small gold locket, each piece catalogued beside a parchment scroll recounting their provenance. Clara Matthews, her maid's uniform now replaced by mourning black, stood beside Signora Conti, who had been invited to contribute a dedication about truth and restoration. The violinist's handwriting, graceful and assured, offered a poetic bridge between past shame and present redemption. "Mon ami," Lord Ashcroft greeted Poirot quietly. "The exhibition will open to our guests this evening. I wish for nothing to remain hidden in these corridors." Poirot inclined his head. "The greatest light dispels even the deepest shadows, my lord, but even light casts its own reflections. We must remain vigilant." Lady Ashcroft turned to them, her expression brightening with newfound resolve. "Father, I have arranged a recital tonight in the gallery. Signora Conti will perform, and the display will stand as a testament to honesty. We shall invite the entire county." A murmur of approval rose among the assembled staff and guests. Colonel Fitzwilliam, stationed near the doorway, nodded in salute. Miss Maitland offered a shy smile, evidently honoured to witness the transformation of scandal into celebration. Yet even as the gallery buzzed with anticipation, Signora Conti's gaze drifted toward the portrait of Percival Ashcroft high on the wall. His stern features seemed to watch the proceedings with a silent judgment. She approached the painting, her violet gown whispering across the marble floor. "Signora?" Poirot's voice followed her, gentle but insistent. She laid a gloved hand on the frame. "Percival's story ends here, but the symphony of this house continues. I wonder, are we too actors in his unfinished composition?" Poirot joined her, studying the painted visage. "Every portrait is a note held in time, Signora. Some chords resolve, others linger in suspension. Her dark eyes met his. I sense that our trials are not yet complete. He offered a small smile. Then we must listen carefully. Tonight's recital and exhibition will draw many eyes and perhaps tempt a final whisper of mischief from those still bound by envy or regret. Before Signora could respond, a soft click sounded behind them. They turned to see Lady Langley, her posture refined, but her gaze uneasy. "Mademoiselle Langley," Signora greeted her warmly. "You have been invited to accompaniment. Will you join this evening's performance?" Lady Langley bowed, her slender hand clutching sheet music. "I would be honored." Yet her gaze flickered toward Clara, who stood apart, shoulders straight but lips pressed in a thin line. Poirot observed the exchange, fingers steepling. "Might I speak with you both, privately, before the rehearsal?" They nodded, and he led them to the adjacent conservatory. There, under the shade of potted orchids, he addressed the two women in low tones. "Your acts, yours and Miss Matthews's, have shaped this house's narrative. Yet I sense one unresolved dissonance remains. Tonight's event will unite the community, but if you bear lingering doubts or debts, now is the moment to reconcile them." Lady Langley's voice trembled. "I wished only to share the spotlight, not to steal it. I fear my envy may have left deeper wounds." Clara drew a shaky breath. "And I acted in secrecy for the manor's good, but I fear my concealment betrayed my loyalty." Poirot regarded them kindly. "Together you may harmonize these regrets. Apology given and acceptance received can create the most beautiful of compositions." They exchanged glances, and in that quiet conservatory, offers of apology and forgiveness passed between them, spoken softly, but carrying the weight of genuine contrition. As twilight approached, the gallery brimmed with guests in evening dress. The silver case opening ceremony concluded with Lord Ashcroft's toast, and Signora Conti took the stage. Her violin rose in gentle crescendo, weaving through melodies of hope and renewal. Behind her, the jewels glinted like distant stars, and in their facets lay the manifold reflections of human frailty and forgiveness. Poirot stood at the back of the room, cane in hand, a faint smile on his lips. The shadows that once haunted Ashcroft Manor had receded beneath the clarion call of truth. Yet in the hush between each note, he remained ever vigilant, ready to guide the next movement of this grand, unfolding score. Chapter 14. Secrets in the Servants' Wing. Dawn's pale light crept through the small mullioned windows of the servants' wing, revealing narrow corridors lined with simple oak doors and polished brass numbers. The hush of early morning was punctuated by the distant creak of floorboards and the faint whistle of steam from the kitchen boiler. Here, among the quiet murmur of tasks beginning, a different rhythm of life thrived, one as essential to Ashcroft Manor as the grand concerts and glittering jewels above. Hercule Poirot made his way through the corridor, cane tapping softly against the worn floor. He paused outside the door of the linen room, where Clara Matthews had slept on a narrow cot. The maid's loyalty and courage in revealing Percival's hidden treasure had earned his admiration, yet he knew her conscience still bore a weight. He rapped gently and entered. Clara sat at the edge of her cot, hands folded, looking as though she had not slept. The single oil lamp beside her cast a warm glow across neat shelves of folded sheets and pillowcases. A pale blue sheet, embroidered with initials C.M., lay unfolded in her lap. "Madame," Poirot began, "I trust you are well after last night's revelations." Clara rose, smoothing her apron. "I am, monsieur. yet I fear that my actions may have brought hardship upon those I care for here." He moved to stand before her, eyes kind. "Your intentions were noble, but secrets in this wing run deeper than the treasure you unearthed." He tapped the embroidered sheet. "I have come to ask about the family that preceded you." Clara's gaze fell. "My grandmother spoke of the old housekeeper, Mrs. Penelope Graves. She vanished one night many years ago. Some say she was dismissed. Others whisper she ran off with a lover." Her voice wavered. "No one ever knew the truth." Poirot nodded, steepling his fingers. "Yet Mrs. Graves served Percival Ashcroft's household until the scandal broke. She would have known these hidden corridors well." He leaned closer. "Do you believe she hid anything, perhaps letters or journals, that might shed light on her disappearance?" Clara hesitated. "My grandmother said Mrs. Graves kept a small diary bound in burgundy leather. It vanished the night she left." She paused, swallowing. "I believe it may still lie somewhere in the manor, perhaps forgotten behind a false panel or beneath floorboards." Poirot's eyes brightened. "Then our work is not yet complete. For every diary discovered is another chord in the composition of history." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Will you assist me in locating it?" Clara nodded, determination sharpening her features. "Yes, monsieur, I will help." Later that morning, Poirot and Clara retraced his earlier discovery of the hidden passage behind the gallery. They paused at the stone-lined corridor's midpoint, where a faint draught seeped through the mortar. Poirot knelt, running a gloved finger along the cold stone. "Here," he murmured, "you sense the hollow beneath the wall. A thin panel conceals a shallow niche." Clara produced a small waxed tool from her apron pocket, one she had used for cleaning intricate woodwork. With careful pressure, she pressed at a seam, and the panel shifted inward. Behind it lay a narrow alcove, just large enough for a single book. Clara's breath caught as she reached inside. Fingers closed around a slim volume, its leather cover cracked and faded, the title worn unreadable. She withdrew it, reverently. "Mrs. Graves's diary," she whispered. They returned to the linen room, where Clara laid the diary on the table. Poirot poured each page with soft lamplight, reading slender handwriting that spoke of love, loyalty, and heartbreak. Penelope Graves described her devotion to Percival Ashcroft, her horror at discovering his hidden jewels, and her loyalty torn between protecting the family name and exposing his crimes. In the final entry, she wrote of a planned departure, intended to return the jewels to safety should scandal erupt. Clara gasped. She never returned. She carried the jewels away, convinced the family should not profit from sin. Poirot closed the diary gently. Her heart was true, though her choice provoked her banishment, and her actions mirror your own bravery tonight. He looked up. These words will reshape the narrative of Ashcroft Manor, not as a tale of disgrace, but of compassion guiding moral action. Clara's eyes shone. "What shall we do with it, monsieur?" He folded the diary and handed it to her. "Present it to Lord Ashcroft. Let the county hear not only of Percival's fall, but of Penelope's courage. And through her voice, the servants' wing will be honoured as the moral compass of this house." That afternoon, Poirot guided Clara through the grand corridors to Lord Ashcroft's study. From servants' wing to drawing room to library, the manor's hierarchy fell away until they stood as two individuals connected by truth. Lady Ashcroft and Signora Conti waited with Lord Ashcroft, whose eyes reflected both surprise and anticipation as Clara presented the diary. As the first pages were read aloud, a hush descended. Penelope Graves's words, written in trembling script, wove a deeper harmony into the manor's legacy. And in the quiet that followed, Ashcroft Manor embraced the revelation that even the smallest voice, speaking truth from the margins, could transform history's refrain. Chapter 15. The Tides of Legacy. A week had passed since the unveiling of Penelope Graves's diary and Percival Ashcroft's jewels. The gallery's recital and exhibition had been hailed as a triumph of candour, but under the surface of celebration, new currents swirled. On this autumn morning, the manor felt both lighter, freed from its heaviest secrets, and yet more charged, as if awaiting the final movement of its intricate symphony. Hercule Poirot descended the grand staircase into the drawing-room, where the firelight danced upon richly woven tapestries and dusky Persian carpets. Lord Ashcroft sat behind his writing desk, quill poised over formal invitations to the county's elite, his countenance distant. Lady Ashcroft lingered at the window, gazing out at the rose garden, now streaked with crimson and gold. Signora Conti practiced a melody on her violin in a corner, each note carrying both elegy and hope. Poirot approached the desk. "Mon lord," he began softly, "your invitations seek to commemorate our revelations. Yet I sense you carry an additional burden." Lord Ashcroft set down his quill. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot, the county gazettes praise the moral courage of Penelope Graves and my late great-uncle's restitution, yet my conscience wrestles with an unspoken question. Whose responsibility now claims this estate's future?" Poirot allowed a moment's silence before replying, "The future is born of today's choices. You have reclaimed the past. Now you must shape what follows." Before Lord Ashcroft could respond, a gentle rap announced a visitor. Lady Ashcroft rose to admit Colonel Fitzwilliam and Miss Edith Maitland. The Colonel's posture remained courteous, but his eyes held concern. Miss Maitland, her governess's attire replaced by sober grey, clutched a leather-bound folder. "Begging your pardon, madame," the Colonel said, bowing. "Miss Maitland writes to deliver a proposal on behalf of the youth at Langley Hall." Miss Maitland stepped forward. "My lady, in light of Mrs. Graves's revelation, the children and I have prepared a petition to endow a scholarship in her name for daughters of former Ashcroft staff, enabling them to pursue education beyond these halls." She offered the folder. Lady Ashcroft's eyes glistened. "This is most generous, Edith. You honour Mrs. Graves's legacy." Lord Ashcroft opened the folder, scanning the neat handwriting and signatures of young scholars. "A fine idea," he said at last. "We shall establish the Penelope Graves Trust, but it will require funds beyond the jewels displayed. We must allocate revenue from the estate's endowments." Poirot nodded approvingly. "An act of structural justice. Your legacy will no longer depend on hidden hoards, but on the daily enrichment of hearts and minds." As plans formed, the door opened again to admit Clara Matthews, her uniform now replaced by a modest town dress. In her hand, she carried a small leather pouch. "Lord Ashcroft," Clara greeted, bowing. "I have returned the pouch of remaining gems that did not appear in the gallery, emeralds and rubies of minor value. I thought they should be handed over formally." Lord Ashcroft rose. "Your integrity inspires us all, Clara. We accept these additions gratefully." He took the pouch gently. Suddenly, Signora Conti's melody trailed off. She lowered her violin and stepped into the centre of the room, eyes alight with decisive energy. "Excuse me," she said, addressing the assembly, "but in rehearsing a new concerto last night I discovered a hidden compartment beneath my music stand, a carved panel concealing a sealed scroll. I feared it irrelevant to our matters, but this morning I opened it. She held forth an aged, folded parchment, sealed with wax, bearing the Ashcroft crest, Poirot's. Moustaches twitched with curiosity. Lord Ashcroft accepted the scroll, breaking the seal with careful fingers. The parchment unfolded to reveal a deed, signed by Ashcroft's earliest forebear, declaring the manor and its lands irrevocably dedicated to charitable use for the good of all servants, tenants, and neighbours. A hush fell. Lady Ashcroft stepped closer. This covenant, it predates Percival's misdeeds. Poirot gestured to the deed, an expression of founding intent, long buried under the weight of private ambition. He looked to the group. Your ancestors envisioned Ashcroft Manor as a source of public benefit. Now, with Penelope's scholarship and this deed, you stand at the cusp of fulfilling that vision. Lord Ashcroft's eyes glistened. So it is written, the estate should serve beyond its walls. He turned to Clara. Your grandmother and Mrs. Graves guided us toward this destiny. We must now honour them both. Lady Ashcroft placed a hand on her husband's arm. Then let us establish the Langley and Graves Foundation, combining education, healthcare, and apprenticeships for our community. Miss Maitland and Colonel Fitzwilliam exchanged warm smiles. Even Clara's relief was palpable. Poirot surveyed their faces, their resolve, tempered by humility, and allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. He raised his cane in gentle salute. Monseigneur, you have restored your family's legacy, first by unveiling the past, then by embracing its higher purpose. Tonight, the manor's halls will sing not just with music, but with the promise of a future born from compassion. As the group gathered around the desk to draft mandates and sign new deeds, the manor's walls seemed to exhale, as though relieved to see its secrets finally harmonized with noble action. In that moment, Poirot sensed the final chord of Ashcroft Manor's long symphony, a refrain of restoration, unity, and hope, ringing true through every corridor and heart within. Chapter 16. Discord at the council table. The late afternoon sun filtered through the mullioned windows of Ashcroft Manor's council chamber, where a long mahogany table stood polished and imposing. Around it sat the core committee of the newly formed Langley and Graves Foundation, Lord and Lady Ashcroft, Signora Conti, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Miss Maitland, and Clara Matthews. At the head, Lord Ashcroft tapped his quill against the parchment of bylaws, preparing to call the meeting to order. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice steady, we convene today to establish the Foundation's first initiatives, the Graves Scholarship, community apprenticeships, and outreach to neighbouring villages. Our philanthropic mission rests upon clarity of purpose and unity of action. A respectful murmur of assent rippled around the table, until it was broken by the entry of Lady Sloane. Her silken gown swished as she approached, and she drew a slender leather portfolio from beneath her arm. My apologies for arriving late, she said, voice smooth. I trust I may join you? Lord Ashcroft inclined his head. Of course, Lady Sloane. Please, sit. Lady Sloane settled into an empty chair beside Colonel Fitzwilliam. She opened her portfolio and withdrew several sketches, architectural drawings of a proposed community hall funded by the Foundation to host lectures and concerts. I took the liberty, she explained, of designing a multi-purpose hall near the manor grounds. It would accommodate musical performances, educational lectures, and apprentices' workshops. I believe it aligns with our charitable aims. Miss Maitland leaned forward, eyes bright. This is splendid, a place for scholars and artisans alike. Signora Conti smiled. and an ideal setting for recitals, bridging high art and community spirit. Lady Sloane's gaze flicked to Clara Matthews. Of course, Clara, you may oversee the domestic staffing and maintenance plans. Clara hesitated, exchanging a quick glance with Poirot, who stood just outside the chamber. She was unused to such direct authority, but nodded. I will prepare estimates for upkeep and staffing. The foundation for consensus seemed secure, until Signora Conti's eyes narrowed. Lady Sloane, forgive my curiosity, but have you consulted with the Village Musicians Guild? They might object if a hall under the manor's patronage overshadows their own modest venue. Lady Sloane's posture stiffened. I assumed the guild would welcome patronage. If not, we shall negotiate terms, Colonel Fitzwilliam interjected. Better to involve them at the outset. A top-down edifice risks alienating those we intend to uplift. Lady Sloane's lips curved in a polite, measured smile. Certainly. Then we shall schedule a council with the guild next week. The tension settled, but only momentarily. Miss Maitland then raised a concern. Regarding apprenticeships, I propose we include agricultural training as well as crafts. Many village youth rely upon farming. Lord Ashcroft tapped his quill. Agriculture falls within the Foundation's mandate. I suggest we form subcommittees: arts, education, agriculture, and infrastructure. Lady Sloane's gaze lingered on the agricultural sketch of barns and communal gardens, her portfolio closed now. Very well. But we must be cautious. Expanding too broadly might strain our resources and dilute our impact. Clara chimed in, voice earnest. I believe our resources will grow through public events and donations. The hall itself can generate revenue from concerts. Signora Conti nodded. Art sustains both spirit and sustenance. Colonel Fitzwilliam leaned back. Then we have a structure, subcommittees reporting monthly with budgets reviewed quarterly. Agreed? A collective assent followed. Yet Lady Sloane's eyes flicked across the table, calculating. As the meeting adjourned, she lingered, exchanging curt pleasantries with Lady Ashcroft. Once the chamber emptied, Poirot entered, closing the door softly behind him. Clara, gathering her papers, started at his approach. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered, will it proceed smoothly? He studied the scattered sketches and minutes left on the table. The Foundation's ambitions are noble, but ambition alone can sow discord if not tempered by foresight. Clara frowned. Do you suspect sabotage? Poirot steepled his fingers. Not sabotage yet, but personality clashes can fracture unity as surely as malice. Observe Lady Sloane. Her designs are elegant, but her influence risks overshadowing others' contributions. Clara's brow furrowed. She has passion for architecture and society, but perhaps she underestimates the Foundation's wider needs. Poirot nodded. Precisely. It would serve us well to ensure each subcommittee's voice is heard equally. Encourage genuine collaboration, rotate leadership, set clear mandates, and invite the village's representatives to the table. Clara's shoulders relaxed. I will propose that at our next meeting. He offered a gentle smile. Good, and I shall speak with Lady Sloane. Remind her that the greatest patron is one who listens as well as leads. Clara glanced toward the chamber doors. May I help? Yes, Poirot said, his eyes warm. Convey my respects and my confidence in this Foundation's promise. With prudence and unity, Ashcroft Manor will at last attain its destiny. Together, they left the chamber, closing the door on the grand table and its lingering echoes. Outside, the manor's corridors seemed to hum with potential, every whispered debate, every sketched plan weaving the next movements in a grand composition of progress and purpose. Chapter 17. A Test of Foundations. A low mist clung to Ashcroft Manor's rose garden as dawn broke, the dew-laden petals bowing under the weight of early autumn's chill. Yet within the walls, activity hummed like a living organism. In the courtyard, labourers unpacked scaffolding for the new community hall. In the stables, apprentices practised harnessing horses for farm work. The Langley and Graves Foundation's ambitions had translated into motion, yet motion, like water, can both nourish and erode. Hercule Poirot stood upon the gallery's western balcony, cane in hand, overlooking the bustling scene. Below him, Clara Matthews oversaw the unloading of crates inscribed "Library Shelving," her posture firm but fair. Across the courtyard, Lady Sloane conferred with the master mason, her silk gloves tucked into her reticule as she gestured animatedly. Poirot observed them both, his small grey cells already weaving patterns of cause and effect. A soft voice interrupted his contemplation. "Monsieur Poirot?" Signora Conti emerged from the corridor behind him, violin case in gloved hand. "Forgive my intrusion so early." He smiled. "Not at all, Signora. I anticipated you might wish to accompany me. Your insight into harmony extends beyond music." She inclined her head. "I sensed tension brewing beneath our progress. The Council's unity last week felt genuine, but today, I fear competition has taken root." He nodded. "Indeed. Lady Sloane's vigour for the hall's design risks overshadowing the agricultural and educational subcommittees. Balance is crucial." They descended the stone staircase toward the Foundation's temporary offices in the old servants' wing. Along the corridor, Miss Maitland distributed schedules to tutors and farm foremen, while Colonel Fitzwilliam organised logistics with local constables. The ancillaries of charity often demand less spectacle and more persistence. Inside the largest room, a former linen storeroom, they found Lord Ashcroft at a drafting table, poring over budget sheets with furrowed brow. Lady Ashcroft stood beside him, offering cups of tea to the arriving subcommittee leaders. The air was redolent of chamomile and fresh parchment. "Mon ami," Lord Ashcroft greeted Poirot, "we are ready for the first monthly review. Yet I admit, I worry Lady Sloane's plans have outpaced our means." Lady Sloane entered then, portfolio in hand, her expression courteous yet guarded. "My designs merely reflect the community hall's importance to our mission. I have drafted a seating plan and acoustical diagram for your consideration." Clara stepped forward. "With respect, Lady Sloane, the villagers' needs extend beyond a hall. They require farmland improvements, school books, and medical care. Resources, I fear, may be sidelined." Lady Sloane's smile tightened. "I have factored those concerns into my design. The hall will host agricultural lectures and a clinic on the mezzanine." Miss Maitland exchanged a glance with Colonel Fitzwilliam. The Colonel cleared his throat. "An admirable effort. Yet the medical clinic beneath a concert hall may compromise both functions. Perhaps separate venues would serve each purpose more effectively." Lady Sloane's eyes flickered. "Consolidation saves funds." Poirot stepped between them, raising a gloved hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, consolidation and distribution are two sides of the same coin. To pit one purpose against another risks fracturing our unity, like a chord missing its middle tone." He turned to Lady Sloane. "Your hall is visionary, yet vision must rest on the foundation of practical need. I propose we field a survey, a listening tour among the villagers and apprentices, before finalizing the design." Lady Sloane hesitated, then inclined her head. "A survey, Very well. Poirot next addressed Clara and Miss Maitland. And you shall compile these findings. Ensure the subcommittee's voices guide our path. Balance will not come from compromise alone, but from collaboration. Lord Ashcroft drew a breath. Then we cast aside assumption and seek honest feedback. Lady Ashcroft smiled, smoothing her skirt. I shall host gatherings in the drawing rooms, informal teas where villagers may speak freely. Signora Conti clapped her hands lightly. I will perform informally in each hamlet, draw people to speak of their desires while the music flows. Colonel Fitzwilliam nodded. And I will coordinate safe passage and schedules. The Council's unity depends on genuine listening. Lady Sloane closed her portfolio, colour softening her cheeks. I see the wisdom in this. My hall will be all the stronger for your input. Poirot allowed a small smile. Monseigneur, you have tested the resilience of your foundation. Now we build not upon edict, but upon the collective voice of those we serve. As the council dispersed to their tasks, Lady Ashcroft to invitations, Clara to logistics, Miss Maitland to education planning, Poirot and Signora Conti paused in the doorway. Through the open window, they heard the laughter of children racing across dew-dappled grass. She turned to him. Do you believe our efforts will endure? He placed a hand over his heart. Yes, Signora, for true harmony arises when melody and counterpoint unite, each essential, each respected. So too will Ashcroft Manor's legacy endure, born of many hands and many hearts. Beyond the windows, the manor exhaled once more, as if in farewell to old discord. And in the golden light of morning, its halls brimmed with promise, each brick, each beam, each note of possibility, echoing through corridors both grand and humble. Chapter 18, The Final Cadence. A crisp winter dawn settled over Ashcroft Manor, veiling the snow-dusted gardens in silver light. Icicles glittered along the eaves, and smoke spiraled from the kitchen chimneys, carrying the promise of warm hearths and fresh bread. Within the great hall, where once the grand concert had echoed, the Langley and Graves Foundation convened for its first anniversary celebration. A testament to trials overcome and visions realized. Hercule Poirot stood by the high mantel, cane in hand, watching as guests milled between polished oak tables laden with steaming dishes and wreaths of holly and evergreen. Lord and Lady Ashcroft moved among the assembly, greeting apprentices who now apprenticed as blacksmiths and weavers, village school children who received books through the Graves Scholarship, and villagers gathering for the new community hall's winter festivities. Signora Conti, her violin resting in its case, offered hushed encouragement to a trio of young musicians preparing to play a carol. Clara Matthews oversaw the serving staff with an ease born of genuine respect, no longer merely a maid, but a steward of the household's renewed purpose. Colonel Fitzwilliam conversed with the local constable about upcoming planning for spring planting, while Miss Maitland guided a small group of girls through recitations from Mrs. Graves's discovered diary. Poirot surveyed the scene, heart warmed by the harmonious blend of preparation and celebration. He had come at the Ashcrofts' invitation, not to solve another mystery, but to witness the fruition of hope planted in darkest uncertainty. Now he sensed that his work here had reached its natural coda. Lady Ashcroft approached him, her cheeks flushed with gratitude. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, the manor and the village have been transformed. We owe so much to your guidance. He tipped his head in acknowledgement. Madam, the seeds were yours, nurtured by courage, compassion, and collaboration. I merely helped you find the right cadence. Across the hall, Lord Ashcroft raised a crystal goblet, motioning for silence. The chatter subsided as he cleared his throat. "Friends and neighbors," he began, voice resonant with emotion. "1 year ago we faced discord born of envy, secrecy, and regret. But through shared truth and collective purpose, we turned discord into community and secrets into lessons of integrity. Tonight, we celebrate not merely a foundation's anniversary, but the triumph of unity over division." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. At his side, Clara Matthews offered him a warm smile, her journey from shadowed servant's wing to honoured adviser complete in its grace. Lord Ashcroft continued, raising his glass higher. "To Penelope Graves, whose courage revealed our better angels. To the memory of Percival Ashcroft, whose failings taught us humility. To Signora Conti, whose music reminded us of beauty born from truth. And to each of you, whose hearts and hands shaped this legacy." Glasses clinked, and a swell of applause followed. Poirot allowed himself a small, satisfied smile before retreating to the balcony overlooking the hall. From this vantage, he watched the mingling of laughter and song, a tapestry woven from many threads, each contributing its own colour and strength. Signora Conti joined him, violin now cradled in her arms. "The final carol will begin shortly," she whispered. "Would you care to stay for the last piece?" He inclined his head. "How could I refuse? Music completes the soul's narrative, especially when it heralds peace." Below, the young musicians struck the first notes of a quiet, haunting carol. Their melody rose, pure and crystalline, filling every corner of the hall with serene warmth. Guests hushed, letting the harmony wash over them like a benediction. As the carol reached its gentle crescendo, Poirot turned to Signora Conti. "Is this not the perfect conclusion? A refrain of hope that lingers long after the final note?" She smiled, eyes glistening. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. In this we find our resolution, not in closure, but in promise." He watched the children's faces lit by candle glow and wonder, then looked to the portraits of Ashcroft ancestors lining the walls. Their painted eyes seemed to soften in silent blessing, as if ancestors and descendants alike stood reconciled across time. When the carol ended, applause rose again, tender and heartfelt. Poirot tapped his cane twice, a subtle conductor's nod to the evening's harmony. He felt, in that moment, the very essence of Ashcroft Manor's journey, a progression from fractured prelude to triumphant finale, yet ending not in stillness, but in the hopeful silence before life's next movement. With that thought, he turned to leave the great hall, his task complete, his small grey cells at rest. Behind him, the manor's windows glowed like lanterns of welcome, guiding each soul out into the snowy night. And in every footstep echoing through the halls, he heard the enduring cadence of community, compassion, and the promise of chapters yet to be written.